Okay. Hello, everyone. Just want to get a quick okay that you can see and hear me. Great. So, look, thank you so much for joining us. I can see from our registration list that we have people from all around the region. So, for some of you, this is over breakfast or your lunch break or your afternoon tea break. So I am really looking forward to the next hour because what we're going to do is be focusing on marketing and measurement and really demystifying the challenge that so many of us have in terms of short-term performance versus long-term brand building goals. So when Meta first approached us about this target, we really were intrigued to see how brands are conquering the short-term versus long-term challenge. And to be honest, in my role with an industry association, one of the main skepticisms I hear over and over again is that digital is only for immediate performance metrics such as clicks. But given how the pandemic has really accelerated digitalization, this session will showcase new and innovative measurement models so that no matter which part of the ecosystem you're from, be it from brand, publisher, agency, or platform, you can see and hopefully be a bit inspired that there are complete end-to-end attribution models that are being developed to help you do your job better. Today's session is in two parts. We will be hearing directly from our panel of experts who will be sharing presentations and case studies. And then we've set aside time to answer your questions. To keep things running smoothly, the panelists are going to be following on from each other. So first up, we have Felipe Thomas. He is the Associate Professor of Marketing from the University of Oxford. And he'll be taking us through the largest academic study into brand building effectiveness ever. So this study analysed over 1,000 campaigns from over 500 global brands from every region. You'll hear about budget over allocation and over reliance on some channels such as TV and the broad media plan clusters we should be utilising to achieve specific brand goals. Straight after Felipe, we have Pia. She is the CMI country lead from Unilever Philippines, and she'll be sharing about how you can take this theory and really bring it to life, as well as sharing some local case studies from ponds and also the crucial questions to answer as media strategies evolve. Next up, we have Pablo Gomez. He's the head of creative and media from Kantar Insights and a long-time friend of the IAB. He's going to be taking us through Total Marketing ROI, TMROI, which is a tool that quantifies the impact of marketing on building equity and base sales so that the total impact of marketing is measured. In a nutshell, it's the summary of direct impact plus equity impact. Last, but by no means least, we have Diana, who's the marketing science partner at Meta. She'll be sharing how brand building is a longer term process from activation sales in the short term to generating sustainable revenue growth in the long term. She will also share what the key measurement questions are that brands have in the short, medium, and long term so that you can be best positioned to answer them. We'll also be seeing some case studies from around the globe, from mega brands such as Renault, Gatorade, and Heineken. We will then jump back into our Q&A that I will be hosting alongside Oscar Oons, who is the regional client partner at Meta. We're here to answer all of your questions with our panel of experts. Please use the Q&A function that you'll see on your screen to ask questions at any time during this session, so we can have them ready. It's going to be a little bit late in the day for Felipe to join us from the UK, but Pia, Pablo, Gianna, Oscar, and myself are all here for you. So Without further ado, I would like to hand it over to Felipe to take it away.
Hi, everybody. So today I want to share a little bit about some of the newest research out of my group in Oxford. And this one we called No Silver Bullet. Now, the idea here is there's no such thing as the perfect plan when it comes to your media allocation and your media planning. Now, we have looked at over 1,000 very, very large campaigns and observed their performance in exposed control environments. This is for hundreds and hundreds of brands all throughout the globe. There's three important things that I want you to take away from this conversation. The first and foremost is that no, there is no single media plan that's going to address all of the different brand needs and move all of the different aspects of your brand. Now, one of the reasons this happens is, and this is going to come as no surprise to anybody in any marketing room, is that we have an over-reliance on channels like television. It dominates most media recipes. It tends to be the largest amount, not just investment, but over-reliance. We can probably do away and do better mixes with other channels to get higher efficiency. A core component of this is that the perfect plan is dependent on the actual goal. Depending on what you need, depending on what you're trying to drive, that's what's going to dedicate your specific allocation and your budget. Now, what we wanted to do then is look, what have brands done in the past? What has worked? What has not worked? And how do we bring that to the market overall? What we get out of this analysis is 9 distinct clusters. You can think of them as 9 separate recipes. They are going to combine these ingredients here being media channels, in specific ways that augment and improve on the performance against a very specific and dedicated brand outcome. So what might work for awareness, what might work for purchase intent are all going to be different. And what we have then is, if you see these major channels that require a lot of effort and a lot of investment into them, here given as more than 65% of campaigns in that cluster using that channel strongly and meaningfully, versus minor ancillary contributions, support mechanisms for my overall recipe. And we can organize things into this major focus, smaller focus, complementary effects, not just in how they affect each other's own performance in the traditional cross-media analysis and correlations, but actually how they combine to give you better overall performance against specific targets. Now, we looked here at 4 alternative brand metrics, and these are very general. We have things like awareness, and this considering both aided and unaided awareness, and not just overall saliency of a brand, but also association, whether it is a message association, understanding of the brand's positioning, or even just, do you recall a slogan in that sense? Can you connect the slogan to the right brand? Consideration set formation, as well as motivation, which includes purchase intent. Now, what we see is that these very specific combinations address different needs. So if I have something like awareness, you're going to need both TV and newspaper as major components and outdoor channels providing minor support. That might be very recognizable as something of very traditional media allocation that you're very familiar with. An interesting thing that we notice is that the discussion largely around this digital divide, traditional versus new channels, is a pretty false dichotomy. It's not about being in traditional or being in digital as something that makes work, but rather the combination of these various channels that makes things work. Now, an important component, and to me, one of the most important things here, is that there is no equivalence in attention across these channels. It's very easy to say, I am getting attention on TV and I'm getting attention on outdoor, and just consider that an exposure in each one of those is getting you the same kind of amount of brand movement. And that is false. There is no equivalence between these channels. There is no exchange rate. There's no fungibility in that sense. Each channel is contributing a different type of attention, a different amount of attention, and a different aspect to your brand outcome. So we can't treat them as equivalent. One view on TV is not the same as one view on Facebook. They're moving different parts of our brand, and we need to exploit that to get the best possible media combination outcomes. Now, I've been picking on TV quite a bit, and that's mostly because they get used a lot. Almost every cluster, almost every plan is going to leverage TV. What we see is that it's over-leverage, is just being too overused, and budget taken away from TV and used elsewhere in this complex combination of channels can get you much higher performance. How much? In my analysis, looking at the financial modeling of it, I see about like over 2.5 times more efficient in terms of budget allocation if you reorganize your media allocation according to this goal-oriented perspective and not seeking this standard one-size-fits-all or silver bullet approach. Most of the companies and most of the campaigns that are assuming that they just use one singular campaign organization is getting about 25% of the way there. So they can get even as far as 4x the amount of improvement if they abandon that mentality. Now, what does that even look like? Well, what we're suggesting is that depending on the goal that you're trying to accomplish, there's a certain amount of upweighting and downweighting of specific channels to get you to where you need to be. And you see that very often, and this is going to be taking budget away from TV and putting into these other channels that are very good complements and additions to the mix that drive specific behaviors, whether that is if you're trying to move awareness, whether that is you're trying to move consideration or purchase intent. One important thing that we're going to get out of here is that if you try to move all of these things at once, this scattergun, shotgun approach, what you're going to end up with is quite possibly the worst performing campaign. One that tries to move all of the things ends up moving nothing at all. Now, so what do we take out of this? And going back to those 3 major points and things that I want to kind of for you to pay the most attention to. If you hear there is a silver bullet, if somebody comes to you and says, all you need to do is X to improve your brand, to grow your brand, to take a customer and convert them, there is no such thing. You need to have a campaign organized around a specific goal. Now, the channels, and the reason that this works is because the channels themselves are not equivalent. Different channels give you different benefits. So you need to use the right channel and the right combination of channels to get the proper outcomes.
Hello, everybody. In this time of multi-screen usage, there's so many ways we can now reach our consumers and get our brand messages across. And here in Unilever, we have really embraced these changes and made inroads in terms of driving more multi-platform communications. Whereas we previously focused solely on TV, we have now placed significant, if not equal importance to online as another medium. The campaigns we have started to launch cuts across different screens and platforms to ensure that we are able to reach our consumers at every point of their consumer journey with relevant and timely messages. However, as with most companies, we continue to experiment on what content and what platforms help to drive up engagement and sales. We are constantly striving to find the right strategy and balance. We know that advertising helps our brand grow, either through sales in the shorter, more immediate term, or through building the brand by growing brand love, which is more long-term in terms of impact. And with COVID, our media landscape has significantly changed at a level that we have never before seen. With that, we at Unilever have been trying to keep up with the pace and have made the necessary changes needed to adapt our media and communication strategy. And while we know that digital is effective at helping us reach our consumers in a more targeted and personal way, and also helps us build our brands, there are definitely challenges and constraints that come with it. And we know that building brand love has potential to drive higher ROI in the longer term. And this is why this is something that we always want to achieve. So what are the constraints that we experience here at Digital? So for one, consumers have more freedom to skip ads, and therefore we need ads to have stronger creatives to drive up engagement. Number two, We know that usually longer ad durations and are more effective at driving up stronger brand equity. However, this becomes a challenge in a digital environment where people are able to skip through ads. Number three, there are numerous ad formats that need to be adapted to the different platforms where people are in. And lastly, we do not have enough metrics to measure whether or not we are hitting our jobs to be done. We do not always know if the usual engagement metrics that we get from digital are truly impacting brand equity and help to drive up brand love. And we know that building brand means being able to make an emotional connection with our consumers. And this is usually best done via longer ad formats. This used to be less of an issue with TV, given the way that people consume the media, where we also had more time to build more compelling narratives. However, we also know that advertising on TV alone is no longer an option, and we need to find a way to engage more deeply with consumers online. And the way people consume media online continues to evolve every day. There is always something new in the way people engage with things online, and brands need to keep abreast of this in order to reach their target market in the most relevant way. We need to design our campaigns and strategies to take advantage of these developments, and we constantly need to test and learn to see what works. And with the increase of the relevance of online channels, we need to leverage on the strengths of digital, which are precision in targeting, being able to co-create with communities, emotions, and leveraging on influencers to drive more engagement and connections to our brand. With digital, we are able to serve ads at a very timely manner at the right time or context when they might consider using our brand. It is also in digital where we can create stronger engagements and connect in a deeper way, but we also need to be mindful that we don't come out as being too intrusive. And with the new innovations happening in digital, we have more and more ways to really interact and create immersive experiences with our consumers. Now, the challenge is, how can we continue to keep abreast of these innovations in this constantly changing landscape so that we stand out? And lastly, with the amount of time and the different platforms that people engage with, it becomes important to really understand what they are doing in each platform, how they are consuming media here, and the experience they are looking for in each. And once we know that, we will also have a better idea of the role each one plays within our media strategy and how we can actually balance out where we need to place and what type of asset or content we should highlight to drive up brand awareness and experiences. Each platform will satisfy a certain job to be done, whether it be about driving awareness or conversion or driving equity. And we need to learn to maximize the audience overlaps between TV and digital to be able to augment messages across platforms. TV, with the highest reach, will always be the awareness driver, and we are also able to show our longer forms that drive deeper emotional connections and stronger brand narratives. However, TV viewership has also declined, and we have less flexibility in this channel to customize our messages. And therefore, there is merit to augment this with online, where there is potential to really drive engagement and ensure that our brands are able to engage at an even stronger level. So a combination of all these will ensure that we get the best across all the channels, but as things continue to evolve and new innovations online come in, our media strategy will be constantly evolving, and we must be ready to adapt to that. The best media strategy will always be a balance across all, capitalizing on the strengths of each one so that despite the overlap, we maximize the synergies. We also need to use multiple platforms to get the right level of reach because we know that we get the best efficiencies at a certain level of reach. Employing multiple platforms ensures that we are able to get the best reach at the best frequency. And as I said, with the new innovations happening in this space that cater to the evolving habits, we should always be on the lookout for cases where we can test and learn. Of course, we will also have to consider the right brand and the right campaign that will fit into the platform. We have seen some successful case studies where we have been brave enough to try and experiment. And one would be the Ponds example, where we tried out longer forms in Facebook. So previously, we said that shorter forms were what was effective in Facebook, but we decided to experiment with longer forms. And with the Ponds case, we did see that these helped to drive up key metrics with longer formats, indicating that the way people are using the platform is evolving, and they are now more willing to engage differently in Facebook. However, as more and more innovations come in, and we continue to leverage digital and experiment and learn how to maximize different platforms, we also need to understand and capture the true impact of how our campaigns and activities across each of these platforms, and if we are able to build brands in the longer term. Of course, we need to know what are the right metrics we need to look at to be able to measure this, as not all engagement metrics we are able to capture have a direct link back to this. And as we continue to increase our investment towards digital, we need to be sure that what we are doing is indeed helping us achieve our jobs to be done. And this is usually what the business wants to understand. Was my campaign really successful in terms of getting new users? Did we help to drive brand love for our brands? Is this something that we can also do for other brands? These will be crucial questions to answer as our media strategy continues to evolve. And how we measure will evolve as quickly as the innovations we are seeing online. And as more and more measure solutions come in and data sources come in, we need to be sure that we are willing to try and experiment and learn, also when it comes to measuring what we need to measure on.
Hello, today I'm going to talk about a Kantar measurement solution called Total Marketing ROI. I'm going to start actually from the problem, let's say, because we know that CMOs, and this is nothing new actually, that CMOs need to create a connection to sales of everything they do to justify the investment, to justify the budgets. But we also know, and this is from a research actually we conduct every year in Kantar called Getting Media Right, the marketeers are feeling the pressure. 90% of them, as you can see here, is actually consider this as a very important challenge. And pretty much 70% of them are, and this is more important, and finding, and a struggle actually to find the balance between the short-term and the long-term brand equity. Actually, with the current existing MMM tools, we know that on average, and this number can be different, of course, depending on the company and the type of solution, but pretty much on average, around 13% of the media investment actually explains the sales today. So this is not a very big number. And we know actually that this is only part of the story. We know that the marketing investment also seeks to move the brand equity. And brand equity, we know, is a driver of sales. That's one of the reasons why our solution, Total Marketing ROI, we created this solution to be able to quantify what is the impact of the marketing investment on building brand equity. And the brand equity also is impacting on the brand sales. As you can see here, there's a big amount actually of the underlying sales that actually are coming from the brand equity. That gray area that you can see at the bottom used to be in a typical MMM, an unexplained part. This is what we call the base sales, so the brand stock, right? Now we can explain that, and we can explain even more with this solution. Actually, we take into account the brand impact on sales. The contribution is moving up from the 13% that I mentioned to a 28%. So clearly, the contribution of every single channel actually on final sales actually changed dramatically, and the picture changed. Like, for example, in these examples I have from a beverage brand in Thailand, what we found is after running the Total Marketing ROI, we found that channels like social media or even television ended up having a very relevant contribution to brand equity and sales impact. And there was a very different picture from the beginning when the client only saw that mainly channels like search or display or channels that were very focused on conversion actually were contributing to sales. So that new solution actually changed the mix. That's why Kantar Total Marketing ROI provides a framework to measure, to predict as well, and optimize the effectiveness across all marketing channels. And this is also underpinned by, an always-on platform that we have called Athena, where we upload all the results. So Total Marketing ROI provides this link between marketing, sales uplift, and also the brand equity. We use data to do it from trackings to measure the impact on the brand equity. But if tracking data is not available, actually, we are able to run a customized brand equity research proprietary from Kantar called Connect that help us understand the link between this marketing investment and the brand equity. And it's something we can do customized for the specific client and for the specific industry, actually. In the example I mentioned before, coming back to real examples and real cases, here we have this example of the beverage, of the famous beverage company in Thailand. And coming back to that, as we saw, the client actually wanted to analyze the impact of the marketing mix in the brand equity and sales. Traditionally, I have the impression, as I mentioned before, that search and display, as well as all the conversion media, were most effective in driving sales. Right? But after running the modeling, what we found is that television, social media, or even events that were very important for the company, but they never were able to measure the impact on sales. They had a very important role in building the brand equity. And we found that there were many different factors from that brand equity that were correlating and impacting the sales. So what we did is actually we analyzed in the first year, and during the first year, the client actually reallocated the marketing mix. What the client found in the second year is that there was an increase on 14% actually in the marketing ROI because of the relocation actually of the media investment. So clearly we saw a direct impact or optimizing the mix using not only sales as a reference, but also brand equity. And we see this real correlation, as I said, to a higher ROI. Another case I have here is from a luxury retailer that show how influencers in platforms like Instagram were able to drive impact on sales. Initially, as I said, using the traditional MMM models, they were not able to find how the influencer marketing actually were impacting because there was not a direct relation with sales, but we found actually that this influencer marketing were impacting on brand equity. Actually, in this case, the client didn't have a tracking in place. So we run a connected study and we use it for the modeling to analyze the impact of the investment in the brand equity and hence in sales. So actually the new mix show an increase on sales by 18% when we allocated the investment using the platform that we have, Athena, where you can simulate different scenarios, and actually that again ended up in a very clear higher impact on sales. So in a summary, we have worked with a variety of clients. This is a solution that is relatively new in Kantar, but we've been running for probably 3 years around the world. We start in the US, we bring it out to scale it up everywhere, and we are able to do it almost everywhere in the world. And what we have seen actually is phenomenal results. An average improvement in marketing effectiveness ranges from 20% to 30%. Actually, the average first year ROI when we start to implement the solution is a typical, the range goes between 10x to 20x improvement on ROI. And at the end of the day, this is a big program, but it constitutes only less than 1% of the total marketing budget. So it's actually what we have seen is the investment clearly pays off. It's probably the first solution that actually is able to show you what is the holistic view and the holistic impact of the marketing activities or the marketing budget into brand equity, impacting in the long-term building of the brand, but also how this brand equity is impacting on the short-term sales as well, explaining, as I mentioned, a huge contribution to the final sales. And that's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today, and I hope you've obtained new insights into the role of digital in driving brand equity. I am Gianna, Marketing Science Partner in the Southeast Asia team, here to shed some light on the learnings we've had so far on how Facebook drives equity and the way forward on hypotheses we are testing to further accelerate brand building with digital. But first, what is brand building and how do we measure brand impact? As we heard from Felipe Thomas earlier, brand building considers both short-term and long-term goals, encompassing sales activation in the immediate future and sustainable revenue growth in the long run. Along the way, other key performance indicators may be of value to brands, metrics like awareness, equity, consideration, intent, to indicate that the brand is moving in the right direction. Clarifying these short and long-term goals, the metrics that matter, and how to measure them is particularly important and critical in this moment in time. We are still in the middle of a crisis due to the pandemic, and while there are many positive signs of recovery, a specific timeline of global recovery remains uncertain. But what we do know with a high degree of certainty, because this has repeated itself after every major crisis, is that strong brands recover faster. So building a strong brand for long-term growth is important today more than ever. The question to ask ourselves, though, is whether the way we've been building our brands to date remains to be relevant and effective. One way to look at this is from the largest academic study into brand building effectiveness that Felipe Thomas led, where they found that the average brand campaign could be 2.6 times more effective with a different allocation of cross-media spend. To reiterate what was discussed earlier, this specifically means a reduction in TV spend and reallocation to digital channels, ensuring that different media plans are used for different brand objectives, such as a different media strategy for awareness versus familiarity versus consideration. And lastly, ensuring that those different plans deployed a mix of diverse attention levels. We also heard this from Pia, where clarifying the job to be done of each of these media channels continues to be part of Unilever's learning journey, with the best strategy being one that capitalizes on the strengths of each. As I think about these three findings, the immediate question that we would come to mind is, can digital drive brand equity? What role does it play, together with proven media vehicles like television? And as we heard from Pia as well earlier, what are the right metrics to measure that best indicates short and long-term business growth? It is a question that we have always sought to shed some insight on, and in the process, we've been able to unpack it further to allow for deeper learning across a broad spectrum of business questions. On these questions, we've engaged with advertisers on what they could be with respect to the role of brand building in their short and long-term goals. For the short term, say up to 6 months, the key question is, what is the value of brand on top of performance? Among performance-heavy advertisers, their primary KPIs are typically ROAS, CPA, conversions, and as such, they are unsure of the incremental impact that can be generated by brand campaigns. For this, the measurement solution we normally engage with them on would be the Facebook Lift solution. For the midterm, say at around the 6-month mark, it is about understanding whether Facebook can build sustainable brand perceptions. Throughout that period, if there is a sustained level of investment, this looks at the overall impact of all these efforts on the total brand. And solutions that can be explored here would be the brand lift solution or even marketing mix modeling solutions, similar to what Pablo took us through earlier with the Kantar ROI solution. Lastly, for the long term, 1 year and beyond, the question is it possible to generate long-term brand value with ads on Facebook? This is the space where we are very much in the learning phase, partnering with brands across verticals to quantify this impact using long-term MMM models. Again, very much linked to the solution that Pablo took us through earlier that Kantar is currently using. Though our journey is still ongoing in driving clarity across these questions, at this point, I'd like to share what we've learned so far, starting off with a case study from the auto vertical to address the first two buckets. Renault Group, a France-based global automobile manufacturer, faced industry-wide disruption in the shift toward electric and sustainable mobility. To meet this challenge, they began an effort to establish its brand as a leader in this emerging market. They did this by setting high-level goals like brand perception and awareness on electric vehicles. At that time, their teams were still relying on proxy KPIs such as video ad completion rate, viewability, which did not really reflect how brand perception evolved over time. So the Facebook team worked closely with them to drive the adoption of brand lift, which they then piloted in 3 markets: France, Italy, and Germany. Specifically to address this question, they mounted a long-term brand lift study over a period of 6 months using a long-term holdout and manual extension of the study to understand the evolution of brand metrics related to electric vehicles. Looking at the results from Germany shown here, we observed 27% higher rates of desired responses for brand favorability and top-of-mind awareness, and 31% higher rates of desired responses for attribute rating on electric vehicles. So as Renault was able to gain an understanding of the long-term impact of the platform on its marketing activities, they have adopted brand lift study as an ongoing solution, and they're starting to scale this across a broader set of their markets. The second case study is from Gatorade in North America. We're all familiar with this brand, which is all about fueling athlete performance. The team was interested to know how well its Facebook ad campaigns were contributing to brand metrics over time, addressing the third business question we spoke about earlier. So the team was excited to partner with an exclusive long-term research study conducted by Kantar. They analyzed 2 years' worth of Gatorade's media activity from across all channels, including television, radio, print, search, and multiple Facebook and Instagram ad campaigns, among others, to understand each channel's contribution to the brand's long-term equity. Specifically, Kantar looked at and evaluated each channel's performance on unaided brand awareness and brand preference. The study results revealed that using Facebook's mobile-first practices, such as branding upfront, short-form videos, reach objective, contributed to Gatorade's long-term equity growth. On the results, we observed that 22% of Gatorade's media contribution to unaided brand awareness was driven by Facebook and Instagram, and 15% of Gatorade's media contribution to brand preference was driven by Facebook and Instagram, both of which over-delivered versus their respective shares of investment. And the last case study that I'd like to share with you would be one from Heineken in Spain, where they wanted to build a clearer picture of the short and long-term impact on sales of its advertising investment and the contribution made specifically by their brand building campaigns. So Heineken and Facebook analyzed over 2 years of marketing activity using an advanced marketing mix modeling solution with a measurement partner, very similar to what was done by Gatorade. It was discovered that 13% of its sales could be attributed to the legacy effects of previous brand building marketing campaigns across all channels, with a 1.7 times increase in return on investment across all advertising investment. Specific to Facebook and Instagram, a 71% increase in return on investment was observed when long-term effects are taken into account. So I hope both Gatorade and Heineken, in addition to Renault, showed you the importance of leveraging solutions that we have in place, whether it's the Lift solution for brand metrics or marketing mix solutions such as Kantar's ROI to measure impact on sales, to look at both short and long term, such that you have that full picture and understanding how brand building is contributing to your overall business growth. And to close, I just wanted to highlight that as we are very much in the early stages of this learning journey, we continue to redefine the hypotheses to address in this space of brand building. Right now, we have commenced this journey that goes beyond proving whether digital drives long-term brand impact, but also understanding if the use of accelerants improves long-term outcomes. We have identified 3 accelerants to test at the moment. First is around accelerating brand growth by embracing consumer demand for brands to have a positive societal impact, or what is commonly known as brand purpose. The second one is accelerant using insight or data-driven dynamic personalized communications that have a deeper resonance with consumers. And lastly, it is by enabling consumers to immediately act on purchase intent. As we continue this journey, again, I invite you to join us, as this will not only validate the role of digital in driving both short and long-term brand and business impact, but specify the how that will allow us to achieve this at the maximum level. Thank you again for your time, and we'll now head over to the Q&A session to be moderated by Miranda and Oscar.
Hello, everyone. Hope you can hear me well. Thumbs up, please, Miranda, if you can hear me well. Yes, 2 thumbs up. Great. So, again, welcome, everyone. Thanks for taking the time. I believe this was a great start to understand the developing role of digital, exploring more advanced measurement solutions, and identify new ways of how to build the next generation of brands. Especially as we heard from Pablo, that 70% of the CMOs are still struggling with short versus long term. So welcome. I am Oscar Omens. I'm a regional client partner, as Miranda introduced me, at Meta. I still have to get used to it, formerly known as Facebook. I work with the largest of the CPG clients across the region and continuously test and learn on how to improve the outcomes of their investments. And I love the philosophy of our marketing scientists that say, if it isn't measured, it can't be improved. And to top that up, Philippi told us that there is no silver bullet in solutions. So that's why we're all here to find these new inroads. So the remaining time, I think we have approximately 20 minutes left. We are connecting live with the presenters, as you can see them on screen, to further unpack how to measure and improve long-term brand growth. And we hope to address some of your questions that you can still enter into the Q&A box that you see on the right-hand side of your chat. And we'll filter some of these questions as we go in. Before that, let's go to our panel members. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. And I'll start with Pia, if you don't mind.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to be here.
Awesome. So good to see you. So, Pia, thanks for being so transparent and sharing the learning of one of the largest advertisers in the world. The Oxford Learning recommends always using a variety of channels, and you emphasize that as well, and never should any of them sort of exceed 50% of the investment. Now, what are some of the most recent learnings that you've seen at Unilever that either match that or gives a different perspective on how you develop your channel planning, your channel mix?
Thanks for the question, Oscar. So I think we all know that we've been very dependent on TV previously, but through the years, I think Unilever has been quite aggressive in terms of how we've shifted our focus. We've put almost equal balance between TV and online. And in fact, online has become quite a critical channel for us to be present in. And we've ensured that across all our campaigns that there is always a digital component so that we definitely catch our consumers across all touch points and where they spend the most time on. And in fact, we even have had campaigns that have been purely digital in nature. And I think what we really understood or seen is that, yes, we do see overlaps across TV and digital. But what we are trying to do is to really understand each medium so that we maximize the overlaps and get the best synergies across.
Great. Just maybe tapping in quickly into one of the questions that I saw on the panel. Somebody was asking specifically about how sampling was actually standing out as a quite effective way. And then immediately somebody jumped in and go like, hey, is this also using more online kind of sampling? I responded that we'll check in with Oxford, but I assume that Unilever is also identifying new ways to get samples into people's hands, not only hit by COVID offline, but also more online. Is that correct? Sorry, Pia.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I was building on the question of the different channels, and somebody was is sampling, online sampling, something that Unilever picked up as well as
Yes,
something
definitely. Yes,
your brand
definitely.
value?
I think especially last year during the height of the restrictions here in the Philippines, and we've always seen sampling as like a core activity in terms of like really getting to new users. And so we have picked up sampling, online especially. And it is now something that we're trying to build on. We're trying to get learnings. And I think it's also a good way for us to really connect with our consumers one-on-one, because it's an immediate connection with them, and we can get immediate feedback on our product.
Great. Just we saw a lot of data. Some of the content here specifically, we're focusing on the analytics. People who already embraced how we evaluate learnings. Now, when I speak to, I'm originally from a creative agency. There's a lot of skeptics as well there. If we look too much at data, they sometimes believe we take data measurement too far. How does Unilever, for example, allow for balancing the more intuitive gut feel marketing kind of thinking versus the hard data and analytics?
Yeah, well, us here in Unilever, we always try and back our decisions with data. And try is the key word. So because we also know that data is not always available, and we cannot let that stop us from moving forward. And especially now in digital, where there's so much new data sources, or in fact, we may not always get the right data, supposedly, that we need. I think we should not let that stop us, and it hasn't stopped us from experimenting. And I think one important thing is that we do it with eyes wide open. We always do the proper risk assessment among our key stakeholders so that we know what we're getting into, we know what's at stake, and we make our decisions based on this.
Amazing. That's great to learn. And I'm going to actually pass a similar kind of question to Pablo, our friend at Kantar. Now, science is at the center of everything you guys do at Kantar. So how do you guys balance this when your clients, you speak with CMOs, with growth teams, you put some numbers on the board, simulations, and then there is a marketer's intuition. How do you guys allow for how to balance that out in the way forward?
That's a good question, Oscar. And actually, well, in Kantar, normally we've been traditionally, and market research is about, okay, this is the data numbers, the data guys. So essentially, we just give the data and that's it. Actually, that has changed a lot. And just to quote, I think it was Stan who said this from Unilever. He said, what we want from you guys is not data, it's actually ideas. So we are also evolving when we work with partners like Unilever, not to give data. So we just don't throw data because we know data per se, what I'm going to say is a little bit, but data per se is not useful. I mean, data is everywhere today. What actually is what you do with it and how you create an idea on that is what is useful, right? A part of my role is also be part of the creative team in Singapore. So I also work with creative teams as well on how, we know what consumers are thinking and saying. So we transform that into something that is useful and actionable. So I think we really we try to go away from just, giving data per se, to actually work together with you guys based on our experience and using our experience in many different domains and of expertise and try to build something together. I think giving ideas, is for us the goal, which we are not 100% there, I have to say. I think no one is, but that's the goal for us. So, yeah.
That's actually amazing to hear that a fresh look of data into ideas, and we know we always talk about data are not insights, and that's where the brains come in, and we still need people instead of just computers, so they can't take over the world yet.
Exactly.
I'm gonna pop to Gianna. Gianna, we talked a lot about measurement, obviously a crucial element to learn if the efforts that you take in marketing are paying off. Now, we also know that it can come at a significant cost and it can take time. So how have you seen sort of advertisers and, of course, agencies with that scale the learnings fast? What are ways to you've seen people do that successfully.
Yeah, thanks, Oscar. And I'll use the TMROI solution as a very good example, wherein it's a very robust, comprehensive, it's a validated methodology. But at the same time, it is very resource intensive, like in terms of time, the data collection required, investment, etc. And therefore, one of the things that we've tried to do when it comes to solutions such as this is really partner with advertisers to define a subset of their brands that best represent their portfolio. We learn with this subset of brands and then translate these learnings into what we would typically call best practices, right? So these media best practices are something that they can easily code and are easily replicable and scalable across the broader set by nature of how we define the scope up front. And the role of agencies actually is quite crucial in this space, particularly because they are closest as well in terms of how these media investments are executed. They know the language with which we need to articulate the best practices, and they are best positioned to act on them at the end of the day. And therefore, it's really working closely with both advertisers and media agencies that allows for this to come to life in a way that, you know, you do it for a subset, but it scales more broadly to the broader set of their portfolio.
Awesome. That's quite insightful. Miranda.
Thank you so much, Kiana. We've got quite a lot of questions coming through from the audience, so I want to make sure that we're getting those answered as well. Our first one is quite short and sweet, but I'm very interested to hear your responses. So can each of you please, in your own words, define and differentiate marketing versus advertising? And this is a question I know, like, I would love to be able to explain to like my mum better. So I'm also going to be taking some notes. So Gianna, can we start with you?
Yeah, I'll give my perspective based on my role in Meta as a marketing science partner. So the way we think about it is, in a nutshell, advertising is kind of a subset of marketing, wherein advertising is pretty much a means of communicating with your brand's target audience for them to actually, to encourage them to consider or purchase or avail of the product or service that you have on hand, right? But when we look at marketing at a broader lens, this is really to stimulate demand, right? Which encompasses all activities that drive demand, whether that's the promotions you place, the pricing you define it at, the product quality that you make available, where it's sold, where they can avail of it, and of course the communication aspect of that. And as we think of it in that lens, there are also different KPIs and therefore measurement solutions that come into the picture depending on whether you think about it, you want to approach it at an advertising level or at a marketing level, such as what Pablo spoke about earlier. TMROI can pretty much encompass all of it from a marketing lens, but there's also an aspect possibly around just measuring your communication and the impact and equity that he also briefly spoke about. So that's, my take on this.
Thank you, Gianna. Pablo.
Yeah, I think, well, not much to add on what Gianna said, but yeah, I think it's kind of like a T-shape. So at the end of the day, marketing is kind of like, is the process of, I will put the twist of the consumer needs. So it's the process to understand consumer needs and how to, you know, respond to those. That could be, but includes a lot of things as promotions, price. Of course, advertising is, as I agree with Gianna, is probably, you know, the shape of the T is going deep into, you know, how we actually promote our company, our brands, and incentivize the demand, right? So it's a subset, to a degree, it's a subset. Advertising is a subset of marketing and how we are creating this demand for consumers actually to buy our products. If that makes sense.
Thank you, Pablo. Pia?
Yeah, not much to add. I think most have kind of said everything. Maybe I'll just simplify. So I think for me, advertising is really about what you want consumers to know about your brand. So anything that you put forward that, you know, describes your brand or what you want to tell your consumers about it. But marketing, as Gianna said, I think it's really about creating demand, and advertising is just one part of it. So obviously there's availability, there's promotions and all these other strategies that marketing also encompasses.
Thank you, Pia. What about you, Oscar?
Yeah, I think Gianna started it very clearly with that it's a subset, right? It's, I mean, if you really go back to, I'm dating myself a little bit, but to the old school of the 4 Ps, and then it became 5 Ps. Tends to be a bit of the emphasis on how you promote your brand, how you talk about it, where the other parts are creating the total brand kind of experience. So yeah, that's it in short for me.
Thank you. A question over here for Pia, which is very interesting, and that's how does Unilever currently measure saturation on digital platforms? So reach and where people spend time is one thing, but if you're not understanding the diminishing margin of utility, your spend becomes ineffective.
Yeah, so we have a lot of tools that actually help us to measure that one. We work closely with our media agencies as well as our modeling teams in our global teams. So I think we do have data to help us understand, saturation within our platforms. But I think we have most data for TV, admittedly not as much on digital, and I think that's something that we want obviously to have more of.
Great,
Yeah.
Thank you. Oscar, I know there's a few specific meta questions in there.
Yeah, exactly. So back to Guyana. So we saw a super interesting and highly relevant TMROI solution, which requires years back of data and a brand tracking. Now, someone is asking, I forgot who it was, but how can we track brand favorability and being top of mind? So they're asking, are there other research options there, or can a Facebook brand lift play a role there? It's a native Facebook kind of solution. Can you tell the audience a bit more how this is helpful and another way of measuring brand outcomes?
Yes, absolutely, Oscar. And if we think about it as just measuring the Facebook family of apps and the campaigns that you run there, the Lift solution is actually most fit for that, right? So for those of you who would be familiar with the Facebook Lift solution, it's essentially experimental design. There's a test and control setup wherein we have questions to understand how much the campaign has impacted certain brand KPIs that matter to you. And historically, it's been used to measure immediate impact, right? So you run a campaign for, let's say, 8 weeks, you mount a brand lift study on top of that period, and you kind of get an understanding of the immediate brand impact of that campaign. And the way we've evolved the use case of the solution is similar to what I spoke about in the Renault case study, wherein we've now expanded it to have the ability to measure more long-term, right? So to use the same solution, but actually understand impact month 2, month 3, month 4, month 5, month 6, depending on what period is relevant for your brand, but still anchored on that experimental design, staying true to the incrementality foundation that we have from a measurement standpoint. Now, if there is a desire to measure more broadly beyond just the Facebook and the Family of Apps platform, then there are definitely also solutions that can be considered for that, wherein it's a similar process where you list out the brand KPIs that matter. It's done by a polling or a survey based, but you can actually expand it to include both traditional and digital platforms with corresponding attributions to be done.
Clear, very clear. And yeah, we see, I think we're getting to the end of this, so I think we have a minute left, so I'm going to do a real quickie. Any other question we couldn't answer, please reach out to us. You'll find an email coming from IAB as well. You think I can still pop in one, Miranda, for all 3 of our panel members?
Oh, of course you can.
Well, why don't I take that? So we started all this about balancing long and short term, how to balance out the investments there, right? Maybe to each of you, maybe in a sentence, what's the one thing you believe people, say marketers, should stop or start doing when it comes to balancing and measuring these kind of outcomes. Pablo, I'm going to start with you this time.
Well, I think in a sentence is that there is a lot of research that actually support that, not only coming from Kantar, but I can mention why a lot of companies and industry, associations have proved that actually long-term investment actually impacts in the short term as well. So it's the long and the short of it is another example of, we need to actually measure. And the balance between 60-40, 50-50, that will depend on your brand, but you have to do both, definitely.
Awesome. Pia, you want to have a go?
Yeah, probably it's to stop being so boxed up in traditional way of doing things and being just limited to the data that we've been so used to looking at. I mean, with digital, I think there's a lot of other data sources that we really need to start looking through and seeing what insights we can get from that, how we can integrate it to our current data and how it impacts our current KPIs. Yeah.
Brilliant. Jana, finish us off.
Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet, but it's just a matter of experiment and invest in it today. There are solutions that have never been made available to us previously that are now within reach, and it's just a matter of us being able to try it out, see what it comes out for your brand, and just continue the journey and learning.
Continue the journey. With that, Miranda, you want to close us off?
Yeah, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to all of you. Massive thank you for Meta for bringing this to us. There's a whole team behind the scenes that made this happen. So I do want to give a special shout out to Chandana. It was an awesome session. We didn't even broach how we're going to play and measure in the metaverse. So perhaps we need a whole new webinar for that. But hugely enjoyable. Everyone who's attending, you will receive a feedback survey with more details from SurveyMonkey. Make sure it's not in your spam. And we'll see you at the next session. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, Miranda. Well done.